I want to start today with something that is really important and really worth doing, but I also need to be careful because I know the emails I'm going to get after we do this story. Emails saying, David, how dare you perpetuate anti-white racism on your program? What you're doing is only okay because it's about white people. If you did the same segment about black people, it would be so inappropriate. But racism, for some reason, because of the left, is acceptable against whites, but not against anybody else. No. That is not what this is about. Last week, I pointed out, according to a New York Times poll, that among uneducated white voters, Donald Trump has a massive lead. But he loses educated white voters, he loses Hispanic voters, he loses black voters, he loses biracial voters, Native American voters, whatever. The numbers came from a New York Times poll, and they're very interesting. Trump crushing Biden, Sanders, and Warren among white voters with no college education, but losing among white voters with college, losing among black voters, losing among Hispanic voters, and others. The reason that we are separating educated white voters and uneducated white voters is because all of the other groups are against Donald Trump, both when they are and are not educated. So understand that that's why the story is done this way. And it's an important story to do. And when I did the story last week, I got all sorts of comments defending these principled, uneducated voters. They are good people too, and they're not worthless because they don't have a college education. I agree. No one is worthless, period. That is actually in line with my politics, regardless of education. But the point is, what is it about being uneducated and white that connects with voting for Trump? That's a real political question. When we discussed it last week, one person left the comment, quote, "It's almost like education opens your mind to a larger worldview." Okay. Another said anti-intellectualism is a major aspect of the Republican Party. They need people to be uneducated in order to remain in power, and they know it. These are not racist comments. Now, CNN did something interesting over the weekend. They interviewed 6 white female voters without college degrees. Some had voted for Obama before voting for Trump, and others had not, but they all say we voted for Democrats and Republicans in our lives. And this is really important when we consider 2020. These voters, white uneducated voters in swing states, are going to be important in 2020. So check out whether these are people you are comfortable with making decisions about who leads our country, not because of their race, because of what they say, okay? The 3 women who voted Obama in 2012 and then Trump 2016 are asked, how could you vote for both? How did you vote for Obama and then Trump? Why? And take a listen to some of the answers.
Okay, so Marianne, explain how you were able to vote for both.
I voted for Trump because he was not a politician. You get tired of the same old from Washington, and I really wanted someone that would make big changes.
President Trump, he said he was going to take care of us and he was going to make sure we had more money in our paychecks and help us out, because you go to work, you work hard and you have nothing. And then there's people that don't even work that have more than I do.
So this is why education matters. They fell for an empty talking point that has no meaning whatsoever. I'm not a politician, so vote for me. That's not objectively good, right? It was one of the ways Trump tricked people. You may not be a politician, but you're part of the establishment status quo that funds politicians and perpetuates the system we have. And you've used everything from lying on your taxes and credit bank applications, loan applications, to hiring undocumented immigrant labor in order to line your pockets. You're not better because you're not a politician. You're just bad in a different way. If you were more educated, you're less likely to fall for a talking point like that. This is not about elitism. It's about having gone through a process where one learns, ideally, to think things through for themselves, learns critical thinking. You aren't bad if you didn't go to college. You're not even dumb because you didn't go to college. And many people are able to learn these things outside of college. But we're talking about tens of millions of people here who are more likely to fall for these empty talking points. Let's continue.
Has your life economically, financially improved under President Trump?
I have a lot more in my paycheck.
I do have more in my paycheck as well.
My stock portfolio is doing great.
That too.
See, maybe that's why I look at the economy different. I'm not where a lot of you are financially, I don't think. I'm pretty darn low income.
Once again, I have more money in my paycheck. This was one of the biggest ruses of the Trump tax reform. And unless you know how to think about it, you get tricked like some of these folks did. The Trump tax plan included changes to the withholding tables. So lots of people ended up with more money in their paycheck week to week, but a smaller refund at the end of the year. But what matters is what was the total tax that you paid? I've given this example before. If I give you an extra $100 a month in your paycheck, but you get a refund when you file your taxes that's smaller by $1,500, you had an extra $1,200 in your pocket during the year in your paychecks, but then you lost $1,500 on your tax return, you end up $300 behind. Your effective tax rate has gone up. Changing withholding to give people more money week to week, even though in total they might end up with less money. Again, if you are uneducated, you're more likely to be tricked by that. This is not a value judgment. Let's look at a little bit more of this.
Donald Trump was running, and I said, finally, another businessman, and I got fired up.
Has he lived up to your expectations?
Absolutely. I think he's doing just fine. If he says, this is what I'm going to do at this timeline, he does it.
Well, he hasn't built the wall. That was one of his main promises. So, I mean, do you hold that promise against him?
No, because isn't the whole wall part of getting the money from Congress too? And isn't Congress stopping him from getting the money?
First of all, another businessman? Like, what model do we have of successful presidents having been businessmen? We don't. This was another issue. I'm a good businessman, so I'll be a good president. Now think that through. Question one is, was Trump actually a good businessman? It doesn't know. I mean, it's unclear when you consider the bankruptcies, the fact that he started with millions from his dad. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But the real question is, why does being a good businessman, if that's what you are, make you a good president? Another person who fell for true bottom of the barrel, meaningless talking points. And then, of course, she praises Trump for doing what he says he would do. She gets an example of something he promised and didn't do, the wall. Well, then the fault is somebody else's. So this, sadly, is much more common than we would hope in American politics. Now, I'm sure these are nice women. I don't think anyone is a worse person because they aren't educated, but there is no question that certain types of base political arguments work better, are more effective on less educated people. And that's what we're seeing here. Why do I want to teach critical thinking starting in middle school? Why should we teach civics and philosophy and epistemology? Because if you get that type of thinking ingrained in people at an early age, a lot of these bamboozler politicians who count on impossible promises that a more sophisticated person would never fall for, they never get themselves elected. And it's really important to understand also that not everybody who voted for Trump has been tricked. There are people who voted for Trump because they knew what it was that he was going to do, and it was good for them and they got it. Okay, so it's really important to understand that this is only one part of Donald Trump's electorate, but it was an important part. And when you look at the numbers, these are the folks that are overwhelmingly with Trump. This is important stuff. This is important stuff that relates to education. It relates to media. It relates to issues. It relates to empathy. I mean, there are so many things that relate to people falling for talking points in the way that these women have. That's why it's important to discuss, and we're going to keep talking about it for sure.